After two very successful games, it would seem like an easy choice to simply copy the gameplay formula and hope that people still like it. But Resident Evil 3 dared to be different, and the end product birthed the most distinct game of the classic series, a game structured around player choice and freedom. As opposed to picking up simple weapon ammunition, most of the ammo you acquire is in gunpowder form. Gunpowders allow you to choose and change how you approach every combat situation you face in the game. Randomized enemies and guns also aid in giving you a new experience every time you start up the game. Plus, choices during cutscenes changes the enemies and items that you encounter, and when you encounter them. It all tantamounts to an almost RPG-like experience. Now, that sounds very interesting on paper, but how it actually plays out isn't as captivating as it sounds. The key snag in all of its unique and intriguing ideas is balance. Although you have a lot of freedom in your choice of ammunition due to the gunpowder system, there isn't a lot of point to it. Since you can make any type of ammo you like, you only ever really need to make the most useful ammo. I decided to test myself and ran through the game a few times, with each time sticking to very different playstyles. If you see me using different ammo outside of these playstyles, then that was because I had picked up the ammo in the game world. By testing this stuff out, it really gave me a lot of clarity in what was the best approach to the game. Since the shotgun is perfectly adequate at taking on every non-boss enemy in the game, there's no reason not to use all your gunpowder A's for shotgun ammo with AAB mixes, so you barely even need to touch the pistol. Freeze rounds are truly the best ammo against Nemesis, to the point where you can just stand still and wail on him. He does have the ability to dodge grenade rounds, but it doesn't outweigh the effectiveness of the freeze rounds. Not to mention, you get plenty of ammo for the mine thrower, which means that there's less of a requirement for you to make really strong ammo. The gravedigger can be killed with the lamppost, so it doesn't matter what you use on it really. And that's pretty much the ammo criteria for the entire game. If you randomly encounter some hunters, it might help to have some grenade rounds, but that's the only addendum. Shotgun for regular enemies, freeze rounds for Nemesis. You can go with something else if you like, but using your gunpowders for those two types of ammunition is the most accessible, the most comfortable, and the most effective route to go. Any other way feels like you're being purposefully difficult on yourself. Contrast that with the more traditional approach, which gives you fixed ammo per game. It's actually more likely to change your playstyle based on the fact that you have a limited supply for each weapon. In Resident Evil 3, you don't need to change, since you should be able to make more than enough ammo for the easiest approach. So you're actually less likely to change up your playstyle despite all the options. The randomized guns are the Magnum and the grenade launcher, where the game will swap their locations randomly each playthrough, meaning that you get one earlier and one much later. Now, it doesn't really affect you too much at all, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth since the Magnum is sort of useless in this game. Every single common enemy can be killed with a singular grenade round. That in of itself calls the Magnum into question, but the fact that freeze rounds are better for Nemesis anyway makes it even more questionable. There's no enemy during the game that needs the Magnum. Ammo for it during most of the game is non-existent, and that making the ammo for it requires the most amount of gunpowders, 3 A's and 3 B's essentially. So if you randomly get it at the start of the game, it's virtually useless because you don't have the quantity of gunpowders that is required to make ammo for it. And even if you did, every common enemy you would use it on equals to overkill and wasted damage. And you also wind up with a weapon that just isn't as effective to use on Nemesis. So randomly swapping weapons is a good idea. It's unfortunate that it's tied to a weapon that is completely unbalanced, which ruins its execution. When it comes to the different paths you can take, they're either inconsequential to gameplay and story, or have a very clear choice for what is the better option. For example, the clock tower fight with Nemesis is affected by whether you stay on or jump off the tram. Jumping off means that Nemesis keeps his rocket launcher, but you get some free freeze rounds. Staying on means that Nemesis loses his rocket launcher, but no free freeze rounds for you. Now, from my perspective, this choice is fairly stacked. Nemesis's rockets are easy to avoid, even if you can't dodge. Also, the fact that he's more likely to be at a distance means that it's easier to stun lock him with the mine thrower and freeze rounds. No matter what kind of playthrough or weapons you're going for, you can beat Nemesis easily by jumping off the tram, since the mine thrower and the free freeze rounds you get will be more than enough to handle him. This is really just one example of the choices that are clearly stacked with one route over the other. There's never really a situation in the game that has that trade-off with positive and negative impacts. So in summary, the choice system is either pointless or has a clear linear choice. On the randomized enemy system, it's purely based on chance and not some kind of dynamic difficulty adjustment. So how easy or how hard the game is purely up to chance. It's not uncommon to have an overly easy playthrough based on this RNG element. It's also not uncommon to have some very poorly balanced enemy placements in some rooms. So what sounds like a cool feature, more often than not makes the game either more boring or more annoying. To summarize what I've been saying, there's balance issues. Balance issues in just about every aspect of gameplay, and single player balance is something really hard to get right, and can be an overlooked element of game design. I feel as if in Resident Evil 3, they were perhaps too focused on including as many new mechanics as possible rather than perfecting them. It's mechanically more dense than the previous games, and even some of the following games, but density isn't necessarily depth. And the lack of refinement with its mechanics ultimately leads to a both unstable and linear experience. But despite my criticisms, Resident Evil 3 had the most forethought into the issues that would hinder the majority of the following classic-style Resident Evil releases, which is a lack of interesting mechanics and experimentation. You can feel the effort in this game, and I think it's easy to see why some people consider it the best in the series. But in my opinion, it's a bit undercooked and should have been left in the oven a little longer.